Hi there, fellow entrepreneur. In this section, I'll teach you how to define success. Let me explain why this is an important skill that you need to take with you into your idea validation process and beyond into your execution if your idea turns out to be the right one. So firstly, I would argue that you cannot be successful at anything unless you have defined what success looks like. Think of it like an athlete. You know that most people can long jump about 3 meters. You know a good long jump can be around 7 meters, and the world record is somewhere above 8. So if you train all your life, you know what your personal record is, you know what your competitors are doing, and you've set a goal for yourself, a distance that defines success. Reach that goal, and you've been successful. Just like in this example, you need to know what success looks like for your idea, so that you know whether you've failed, done okay, or succeeded completely. So the second reason why a definition of success is important is that it forces us to think about the numbers we put into our hypothesis. It gives the numbers more weight and more meaning. And that is the start of forming a business model. Assuming that you want to succeed with your idea, if it is a business in itself or a product or a service that will make money, or another idea that is measured by other parameters, like a not-for-profit project, we can use our numbers and the definition of success to find out whether what we're doing is sustainable, meaning, is this sensible? Should we continue or find a better idea? If you put a number in your hypothesis that clearly prices your idea below what it will cost to create, market, sell, and distribute, you'll lose money for every unit that you sell. And if that is the case, then you must know about it and take this into account in your assessment of whether you are going to implement the idea. Perhaps already at this stage you identify that the idea is not the right idea because it's obvious that it will be impossible to make it for less than what you plan to sell it for. Now, if you see that your numbers don't match what constitutes a success to you, don't be discouraged. The whole point of the idea validation framework is to help you validate your idea, and 85% of new ideas are, as we've learned, the wrong idea. They are failed projects waiting to be carried out by someone who does not validate in advance. A little pain and sadness from discovering this now is much better than a lot of pain later. So as an example, if my idea was Woof, beer for dogs, and with my experience in food production, I knew with a high degree of certainty that it would cost, let's say, about $40 to make a can of dog beer. Yes, I know, it's silly numbers, but you get the point. If my definition of success, in this case, building a profitable business that sells beer for dogs, depends on, say, 20% of dog owners being willing to pay $50 for a can of beer, then we all realize that this is an idea we should probably not spend more time on. There is yet another reason why it's important to look at your numbers and evaluate what success looks like for your idea. And it's connected to something I call unknown unknowns. When Apple developed the iPad, the industry had already been exposed to many tablets in many shapes and sizes, but the tablets were not successful. The iPad is a tablet, but it was different from other tablets in many ways. In fact, it was more limited in its expandability and versatility compared to the more open concepts of a traditional PC in a slim form factor, where you can install and run and modify applications and the operating systems freely. But the unknown unknowns of the iPad and its acceptance in the market made it one of the greatest product successes of our time. The iPad beat all doomsday prophecies from the industry experts. But why? Well, we don't know why. Perhaps it was because the closed ecosystem of Apple and the concepts of apps and the integrated experience of the iPhone was so familiar to customers that they wanted this experience even when it was more expensive and technically limited, compared to the other options. That might be the case, but then again, maybe not. Remember, opinions are dangerous. But we can discover unknown unknowns. when we validate our ideas. And defining success is important, but validation also gives us the opportunity to test multiple times and discover things we did not anticipate. You can adjust your hypothesis based on the outcome of any experiment, and you should do more experiments to validate your findings, both if they are good and if they're worse than what you would like them to be. The reason for that is that we can find unknown unknowns, which can be our iPad moment. Maybe dog owners will actually pay $50 for dog beer, even if it seems unreasonable now. Perhaps people will pay more for a limited tablet, although the experts think that that is unlikely. These are unknown factors, the unknown unknowns, which we can only uncover by validating. For example, for the iPad, focusing only on the tablet market, which didn't really exist, could be the wrong audience. Getting 5% of that market as it existed when tablets weren't really a success, versus getting, say, 30% of iPhone users to buy the iPad is probably a big shift in the business model. And it may be that they are willing to pay a higher price than what was the current de facto on the tablet market. And these creative twists in the hypothesis and definition of what constitutes success require us to think differently about our hypothesis, our audience, and what constitutes success for our idea. All of this can be discovered through validation experiments, giving us room to adjust rather than discarding our idea too quickly. Now, your idea might define a new market, a new category, and while the numbers may look discouraging in your hypothesis, there is very little cost associated with validating your idea when you use common sense and this particular framework. So even if your numbers look challenging, you should definitely consider validating the idea, because you will learn how to validate, and you may find that there is a market for what you plan to create, even if it looks unrealistic at this point. So remember, opinions are dangerous. That's why we validate, to get real data. And with real data, we can adjust, turn things around, retest, and find unknown unknowns. So how do we define success for our idea? Looking at our hypothesis, if the hypothesis becomes reality, will it be a success for you, your team, your investors? And typically this relates to profitability. If the answer is yes, you're done. Your success is defined and you can just move on. Now, if the answer is no, you need to find out why. Is the market too small? The part of the market that you assume you will reach, is that too small? Is the price too low or too high? Then you have to make some adjustments. At least make adjustments to the numbers in your hypothesis so that you find out what success looks like. You can adjust many times, do many experiments, and collect data before you come to the conclusion that your idea doesn't work. Now, I'm going to teach you how I define success for my idea, Ping Pang. I use desktop research and some simple math to orient myself. So 10% of LinkedIn Premium users who are introduced to Ping Pang will subscribe to $20 a month to find messages they care about and automate response to spam. Now, let's say that with some quick desktop research and some simple math, I discover that $20 a month from a Ping Pang subscriber wouldn't cover the estimated AI cost of providing the service. It's simply too expensive to use, for example, ChatGPT to handle the messages. So I have to, consider some options. I could quickly conclude that this is the wrong idea and move on to the next one. But there may be unknown unknowns that can be discovered. So my opinion that $20 is the right price may be wrong, so I have a lot of options for potential adjustments. I could test with a higher price. I could assume a larger adoption in the target audience from 10 to 15% and thus create a service that is more dependent on scale with lower margins. Or I could look for ways to expand the audience beyond the premium users and then trust that I will find a way to make the service available to more customers, even those on LinkedIn that don't provide access to the premium APIs that I think I need access to in order to deliver Ping Pang. Well, the motivation for these adjustments should be driven by common sense, domain knowledge, my desktop research, and anything else that you can figure out without spending time implementing your idea. So in my example, we would be able to quickly find market data and estimate, the amount of messages that Ping-Pang would have to sort through, and quickly, with a rough estimate of the numbers of AI tokens required to make sense of the messages. If you don't have access to support data, don't worry. You can proceed with your hypothesis with the numbers you already have set. After all, the hypothesis is just an hypothesis, and when we validate, we will get data. Since all ideas are different, there is also an aspect of variables to consider. In the previous video, I talked about the different units you can choose to use when adding numbers to your hypothesis. And while I'm talking about a percentage of a given audience, the price that they'll pay in dollars, and at a frequency like once a month, you have to use the variables that fit your idea. That's how you define success. If your idea is based on a not-for-profit concept, for example, using price per month is probably not that relevant. And next, you need to define success by setting the units that apply to your idea. You still need to define who is the target audience and what actions they need to take to make your idea successful. If it's not buying something, it may be, joining a club, signing up for a newsletter, giving money to a charity, planting trees, picking up plastic litter from a beach, gather crowds, eat pancakes. You get the point. So now I challenge you to apply the lessons learned from this section and ensure that your hypothesis is constructed with numbers that define success for your idea. You may already be happy with your numbers, and that's great. It is quite normal to have to adjust when we have to think about what makes sense and what is actually needed to succeed. And as I said before, for many people, the objective and definition of success is simply to make a profit. There is no assignment for this section, just an invitation for you to look at your hypothesis one more time and make sure that you have defined success and that you are prepared to uncover unknown unknowns when you start validating. See you in the next one.